Hello, everybody, and welcome to Backfired, an NBA history podcast about bad teams, bad luck, and bad decisions. My name is Lewis, and today we're going to talk about two basketball things briefly. But first of all, it is Spotify Wrapped time, and I figured I'd let everyone who listens to this show know that I appreciate that you do that. I knew that I had a decently sized following, but the data it gave me was really encouraging for the future of this show. I didn't realize that I was in the 85th percentile of most followed sports podcasts, which is pretty cool. And also, although my episodes usually are pretty short, I still produce more minutes of content than about 2/3 of sports podcasters. So that was very interesting to find out. Yeah, I view myself as a very small content creator, and obviously I have a full-time job, hence the erratic posting schedule as of late. So I do this on a very part-time basis, but the data suggests that people like what I do, so that is encouraging and very nice. There are 57 people who have me in their top 5 most listened podcasts, and for 11 people, I'm their number one, so that is mind-boggling. I'm amazed that even one person wants to listen to me talk about basketball, but there are quite a few of you, and that means the world to me, so appreciate you very much. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is a long-forgotten sideshow of NBA All-Star Weekend called the Legends Classic, and that's one that I'd honestly never heard of until recently because it was replaced before I was born, but this was an exhibition game that featured former NBA players of varied renown playing two 12-minute halves against each other. And almost everyone who played in this game was like an all-star or had at least a handful of accolades, but some less than others. So the Legends Classic was introduced for the first time as the NBA Old Timers game back in 1957, and then there was a second Old Timers game in 1964. But it was brought back annually in 1984 as the Legends Classic thanks to Rick Welts, who most know as the recent president of the Golden State Warriors. He was also, I didn't really pay attention to the NBA that closely back in 2011, but he came out as gay while he was the president of the Phoenix Suns. So that's very cool of him to be such a trailblazer in the sports world like that. But in 1983, Rick Welts was a league executive working in marketing and promotion. And, alongside soon-to-be Commissioner David Stern, he came up with the idea to bring the Legends Classic back as part of a revitalization of the NBA All-Star Game. At the time, the actual All-Star Game was not a big deal. Obviously, being named an All-Star was, but the actual game was not must-see TV to anybody. But Welts had the idea to make the All-Star Game an event again, and he would do that by reframing it as All-Star Weekend. So not only did the league revive and rebrand the Old Timers game, but they also added in the dunk contest, which had taken place twice before, once in 1976 at the final ABA All-Star game, and then there was a season-long dunk contest in the NBA where all 22 teams had a designated dunker who had a small one-on-one dunk contest against the other team's dunker at halftime of a game between those two teams. And that dunk contest wrapped up during the NBA Finals between the Blazers and the 76ers back in 1977. So All-Star Weekend started in 1984, which was technically a couple of days before David Stern would succeed previous NBA Commissioner Larry O'Brien. But, for all intents and purposes, 1984 was Stern's first All-Star game as the commissioner. But All-Star Weekend would consist of a one-night dunk contest like the ABA had, and then also the Legends Classic, both on one night, and then the All-Star Game the following night. Now, I watched 3 of the Legends Classic games, and it's really funny to watch, honestly, because it's kind of like watching a regular NBA game, but at 2/3 speed. Obviously, these are players who know how to play the game. They're talented. They're hitting shots. They're running 3-man weave and other set plays. But they really just can't move like they used to, and it's kind of funny. So the Legends Classic featured players who had been retired for between 1 and 20 plus years at the time. So there's a wide age range going on. So for example, in the very first Legends Classic in 1984, Wes Unseld and Rick Barry, who had been retired for 3 and 4 years each, respectively, suited up. But then so did Bill Sharman and Dick McGuire, who had been retired for 23 and 24 years each. So obviously, the guys in their mid to late 30s, by and large, were better than the guys who were in their 50s. But, most people had a good time. The quality of play certainly was not great, but the highlight and low light of the Legends Classic both happened in 1992, which was the second to last Legends Classic that we ever had. The highlight was that George Gervin, previously of the San Antonio Spurs and the Chicago Bulls, just a couple of months before his 40th birthday, scored 24 points and grabbed 11 rebounds. He went 11 of 15 from the floor and 2 for 4 from 3. And he announced himself after the game as available for a 10-day contract for anyone who wanted some shooting off the bench. So here's a quote from him. Quote, "I still play some ball in San Antonio against a bunch of bankers. Nobody seems to want to pay me for it, but I ain't lost it yet. I can still shoot the ball." Now that's great and, inspiring and all that, but it was not a great day for David Thompson or for Norm Nixon. Thompson, of course, was the number one pick in both the ABA and NBA drafts in 1975 out of NC State. He chose to play for Denver and then was later traded to Seattle. He battled drug addiction and injury both toward the abrupt end to his NBA career. But in 1992, he had been to rehab, he turned his life around and was working for the Charlotte Hornets. But unfortunately, 1 minute after he checked into the Legends Classic, he ruptured a tendon in his knee and had to be stretchered off the court. But he wasn't the only one because Norm Nixon of Lakers and Clippers fame had basically the same thing happen to him. Thompson ruptured his patella and Nixon his quad. Both were stretchered off, taken to the hospital. And after that, there was only one more Legends Classic until Deputy Commissioner Russ Granick introduced the idea of a rookie all-star game. And that sounded like a much better idea to everybody. So from 1994 onward, we've had some variation of a rookie or rookie in second year all-star game instead of watching a bunch of old geezers tear a bunch of ligaments in their knees. So RIP to the Legends Classic. I do think it would be fun to have one of those every 5 or 10 years or so, but everybody nowadays is rightfully very concerned about injuries, so I doubt that it will ever happen again, unfortunately. And now we're going to move on to the 40-30-60 club, which is the opposite of the 50-40-90 club. I'm sure most listeners are familiar with the latter, but I'll go over the definition of this for those who aren't. The 50-40-90 club is for people who, over the course of an entire season, shot above 50% from the field, above 40% from three, and above 90% from the free throw line. And there are some cutoffs to qualify for the club. A player has to be on the field goal percentage and free throw percentage leaderboards. And to do that, they have to have made 300 field goals in that season, or if the season was shortened for a lockout or for COVID, on pace to hit 300 in a regular season. So, for example, in the lockout shortened 1999 season, that number is 183, which is 300 times 50 divided by 82. And they also have to have made 125 free throws on the season. And again, for shortened seasons, that figure is prorated. So there are 14 individual seasons that have ticked all of those boxes. In no particular order, they are Mark Price in 1989, Dirk Nowitzki in his MVP season 2007, Steve Nash 4 times, which is ridiculous, in 2006, 08, 09, and 2010, Reggie Miller in 1994, Kyrie Irving in 2021, Stephen Curry in his unanimous MVP season 2016. He is also on pace to be in that club again right now. Jose Calderon in 2008, Malcolm Brogdon in 2019, and Larry Bird twice in 87 and 88. But enough about people having good seasons. Let's turn this around. So where the 50-40-90 club has minimum cutoffs, the 40-30-60 club has maximums. As you can see in the episode title and description, it has less than signs before every number. So this is for people who shot less than 40% from the field, less than 30% from three, and less than 60% from the free throw line. Now, if I log into StatHead by Basketball Reference and I click to include only those who qualify for the field goal percentage leaderboard, not a soul comes up because, surprise, surprise, these guys are not allowed to shoot the ball so much that they hit 300 field goals in a season. So we are going to loosen things up a little bit here. To get into the 40-30-60 club, you just have to have played 1,000 minutes in a season and shot at least 1 3 every other game, so 0.5 3-point attempts per game. And when you do that, there are 7 full seasons where somebody has accomplished that. And they are Antoine Walker in 2007 when he played for the Miami Heat. He shot 40% from the field, 28% from three, and 44% from the line. He was on his way out of the league at that point, but he had started every playoff game for the championship Heat the year before, but was on the wrong side of 30 in 2007. Clifford Robinson in his rookie season in Portland, which was 1990, he shot 40% from the floor, 27% from three, and 55% from the line. He would actually improve drastically throughout his career, particularly at threes. He became a high-volume three-point shooter in the 1995 season. He jumped from 0.6 a game on less than 25% to shooting 37% on 5 3-point attempts per game. So that is an astounding turnaround there. Lamar Odom did it twice, both in 2012 and 2013 for the Dallas Mavericks and the LA Clippers, respectively. In 2012, Odom had been traded from the Lakers after the vetoed Chris Paul trade fell through. Odom would have gone to the Hornets and Pau Gasol would have gone to the Rockets, but while the Lakers would keep Gasol, they traded Odom to Dallas after the original trade fell through. And then toward the end of a horrendous regular season in Dallas, Mark Cuban asked him if he was, quote, in or out for the upcoming playoff run, and that turned into a shouting match, and Odom left the team after that. After the season, he was traded to the Clippers, where he'd played the first 4 years of his career, and this would turn out to be his final season. But he went out with a bang, putting together an even worse shooting season in more minutes than he'd done the previous year, although he was serviceable in the playoff series that the Clippers lost to the Memphis Grizzlies that year. Eddie Griffin in 2006, this was a mixed bag season for Griffin. He shot 35% from the floor, less than 20% from three, and just under 60% from the line. But he averaged over 2 blocks per game, mostly off the bench. And he was the Minnesota Timberwolves' leading shot blocker that season, so they kind of had to play him, even though he was really not good offensively. And unfortunately, he had a pretty tragic life. He suffered from alcoholism and other drug addiction. During this 2006 season, he got into a car accident because he was driving drunk and jacking off while watching porn in the car at the same time. And then shortly into the 2007 season, he was waived by the Timberwolves. And then a few months later, he died when he was again driving drunk and ran into a moving train. His car caught fire. Like I said, it was tragic. Do not drive drunk, folks. In the 2007 season, Speedy Claxton played for the Atlanta Hawks and put up a bad shooting season. He was supposed to be much better than that. He had signed a 4-year, $25 million contract with the Hawks in the 2006 offseason, but he was just never healthy. He played 42 games this season, but was interrupted by nagging knee injuries several times. And then over the next 3 years in Atlanta, he only played 2 more games due to a hamstring injury. So that's very sad, but he still got paid. And he has a championship ring from when he was Tony Parker's backup in San Antonio in 2003. And he played every single Spurs playoff game that year. And then finally, Manute Bol, who probably is not surprising to hear in this group given how much he struggled on offense. I'd say the surprising thing for me was that he had a season where he shot enough threes to get into this club. I think a lot of listeners have seen the video where Manute went 6 of 12 from 3 against the Phoenix Suns, but that game's a big outlier. He did, though, shoot over 1 3-pointer per game in the season before he qualified for this club, which was his first for the Golden State Warriors. But now in the 1990 season, he shot 33% from the field, 19% from 3, and 51% from the free throw line. Also averaged a hilarious stat line, 1.9 points, 3.9 rebounds, and 3.2 blocks in 17 and a half minutes. I've always loved this guy. In terms of a discrepancy between offensive and defensive ability, Manute is right up there with Ben Wallace. Manute averaged 5 blocks per game in his rookie season in Washington and literally has more career blocks than points by a very wide margin. Also had a triple-double in 1987 where he put up 10 points, 19 rebounds, and 15 blocks. There are 4 times in NBA history that somebody has had 15 blocks in a game, and 2 of those have been Manute Bol. The other 2 are Elmore Smith and Shaq. Manute had a very interesting life outside of the scope of this podcast, I'd say, but, after his playing career, funded the Sudan People's Liberation Army, which fought to break away from Sudan and eventually did, forming South Sudan. But that was part of what caused the Sudanese government to label him as an American spy, so he was barred from leaving Sudan for a few years. And then finally, Connecticut Senator Joe Lieberman got him and the Bol family to Cairo and eventually to Hartford, Connecticut. Manute died in 2010, but of course his son Bol is doing very well in Orlando this year. But speaking of this year, you may be wondering, is anybody on track to join the 40-30-60 club this year? The answer is maybe. So I reduced the minutes from 1,000 to 200 because nobody has played 1,000 minutes yet this year. But keeping everything else the same, as of this morning, December 2nd, before any games have been played, there are 2 guys, Haywood Highsmith from the Miami Heat and Matisse Thybulle from the Philadelphia 76ers. very sad to see how much Matisse has declined offensively since his rookie year, even just last year. He can barely get on the floor for the hospital Sixers. It's similar to what people said about Chris Dunn when he was in the league. You have to have some modicum of offensive ability to be able to get on the floor to showcase the monstrous defensive ability that you have, which, Matisse certainly does have. But if he keeps up this diminished offensive performance, there's no shot that he makes, an all defensive team this year, which is sad for him. But maybe the eventual interim 76ers coach, Sam Cassell or whoever, will figure out how to get something out of Matisse on the floor, because Doc Rivers sure has given up on him. But yeah, anyway, I will periodically give updates on the 40, 30, 60 club throughout the season. And if anybody joins the club at the end of the year, I'll send them a plaque or something. Anyway, yeah, thank you for listening. Please follow the socials at Backfired NBA Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. As of this morning, I am at 875,000 likes on TikTok, very close to 1 million, which I'm excited about. And someday I will be back on a regular posting schedule, but unfortunately, the increased workload continues for me. Eventually, I will either finish the work or I'll just get fired, which I would welcome at this point. But again, thank you for listening, and we'll talk in a couple weeks. All right, have a good one.
Baby, are you gonna be the one that saves me? And after all, you're my wonder wall.